Now, the TV show was recommended by Cotier, obviously, as I said, and it's a Canadian TV show. So we shall see if I didn't receive too much of a cultural shock. Letterkenny and Shoresy are made by the same guy, but are far from the same show. Okay, okay. Alright, so let's get into it. For those of you that didn't see it, Letterkenny is a 2016 Canadian television sitcom that was created by Jared Keeso, who's a Canadian actor, screenwriter, and producer, and he's also the main role of Letterkenny, at least in season 1. He plays Wayne, that's the guy over there, left to the left, the lefternmost guy there. And yeah, he's best known for creating and starring this show. He co-wrote it with Jacob Tierney, and Jacob Tierney directed it, which I think is a good call, because I don't think that actors, especially principal actors, should direct like shows or films that they play in. I heard about Olivia Wilde's new movie coming out, and apparently it's a bit of a train wreck. I didn't see it myself, but that's what I'm hearing. But yeah, she directed it and starred in it as well. Not a good idea, in my opinion. You'd be surprised how accurate it depicts small-town rural Canada. See, that's why I need a proper Canadian to guide me through some cultural questions that I might have. When it's through all the seasons, the cast doesn't change much from season to season. Jacob Tierney is the preacher who shows up there. Oh, he plays the, what's his name, Gale? No, Gale is the bartender. But no, Glenn also starting with G. Glenn, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so the series began as a YouTube web series, which was titled Letterkenny Problems, and it was commissioned as a television series by Crave in March 2015, debuted on television in February 2016. It follows residents of Letterkenny, a fictional rural community in Ontario, loosely based on Keeso's hometown of Listowel, Ontario. Now, Glenn, yeah. So here it is. Whenever I review a show, I usually do it episode by episode, since I believe episodes are and should be self-contained with its narrative. So I, much like, I watch an episode, have a little break, and then I watch another episode. I kind of separate it into the reviews as well, so I'll keep talking about it through the episodes. But of course, starting a new show, episode 1 is always the most important. If I didn't have to watch a show for a review, I can watch like just the first episode, essentially the pilot, and then see whether it's even worth watching. Sometimes I don't even get through the first episode and discard the show completely. Now, let's move on to episode 1. Ain't No Reason to Get Excited is the name of episode 1. And when it comes to the names of the episodes, and especially the first one, they did it very well. They wrote it very well, because Ain't No Reason to Get Excited perfectly, for me, encapsulates what this show is about. Got to give every show at least 3 episodes? I don't know. Like, when I'm disappointed with writing to a huge degree, then like I know immediately from episode 1 that I will not enjoy it. It's just about the writing, essentially. But yeah, so as I said, it is a very laid back, very kind of like not like extremely excited show that just kind of follows these rural people living in this small town. And straight off the rip, that's very, very apparent. The intro itself, much like in every episode, was very swift, immediately and plainly showing the setting. The text exposition who this is about the residents of Letterkenny, quite works, because it's a comedy, so it works in this case. Essentially, at the beginning of every episode, it says there are 5,000 people living in Letterkenny. These are their problems. In my opinion, very, very effective. Okay, so here is the first thing, right? The reason why, or most of the, so why Gautier talks about this show often is because of like verbal battles or verbal back and forth. And when it comes to like verbal back and forth and basing like or having this as a huge theme of a show, you really need it to be creative, imaginative, and funny. And I must say, the first verbal back and forth that I heard, or verbal battle, if you will, made me laugh immediately. It was two like hockey fuck boys that you see on the screen right now coming to Wayne's ranch to pick up his little sister, and the two hockey bros immediately mocking Wayne's friend Daryl, asking him if that his overalls are really nice, and whether it comes whether it also comes in men's, whether it comes in men's, and Wayne replies, I'm still laughing at it. Wayne replies, Jesus Christ, it is actually fucking hilarious. Okay, I loved it. I fucking loved the writing of this show. I can't keep it any longer. He replies, I think you come in men enough for all of us, which is just ridiculous. which was very hilarious indeed. So straight off the rip, the comedy, the written comedy in the verbal battles at least, is exceptional. Okay, like I'm still laughing at it now. That doesn't much happen. I'm not a guy that will laugh easily. And so just the initial joke immediately floored me, which of course is something that will make me want to watch more, something that immediately got me excited for the remainder of the episode at least. Riley and Jonesy. Oh, those are the names, okay. The fuck are your names? Do you CrossFit? You can cross fuck off. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like the thing is like that there's just so much humor in these verbal battles and verbal back and forths and comebacks and everything like that, that alone kind of already told me that the writers of this show have the capability of making me laugh throughout, because writing something like this and making me laugh like that means that it's at least for that it's going to be watchable, right? So it was a very good start. In short, it was a very good very good start. Sorry. I'm still giddy thinking about this. Very good short. I don't know why. I didn't drink anything today, I swear. Like, I don't know what's happening. I even have my green tea. It's crazy. What kind of backward pageantry is this? You take off your shit. You take off your shirt without taking off your sunglasses. Oh yeah, that is also a great line. So see, like the verbal back and forth, essentially, in short. I don't want to, bore the people that haven't potentially watched the show with too much, laughing at lines that they didn't see in the proper context. But yeah, safe to say, the verbal battles, the verbal back and forth comebacks, everything, it was written very well, and it's very, very funny. Then when it comes to the dialogue itself between characters that isn't just, verbal battles, the first thing that hit me is that it's sort of aggressively Canadian, or at least I assume it's sort of aggressively Canadian. The way they speak, the phrases, their accent, it's heavy. So constantly asking how are you, and answering good and you, and not so bad, and like I don't know. There's just small phrases that make it very, very Canadian. I'm not gonna lie, first episode, before I got used to the way these people talk, it was sometimes I really had to focus to understand them. It was very interesting, for sure. Jared Kiso writes all the jokes. There is little to no ad-libbing. Yeah, I think I could tell from that. Yeah, there's Prime Central Ontario. It is not over exaggerated. Nice. Turn the subtitles on. I understood it. I understood it. I didn't have a problem that I wouldn't understand like a line or something. It's just that I had to focus up a little bit more. That's all. But yeah, it's very interesting the way they set up things. It's very creatively written. That's the other thing. Like the story structure of everything feels just kind of different, kind of fresh. So straight from the beginning, you had this verbal battle, and first it sort of started with a verbal back and forth, and then one of the hockey bros, that's what I'll be calling them from now on, took off their shirt. There was more joking, and you kind of expected the show to like open with a fight. It's a classic kind of action opening, but it stayed with the verbal battle throughout. And that is something that I don't think I've seen, just focusing purely on the funny comebacks and the Hicks, the two Hicks, Daryl and Wayne. And I'm not calling them Hicks because I've decided to call them Hicks. They call themselves, or rather the show calls them Hicks. That's why I call them Hicks. Okay. Them essentially coming out on top in that battle, despite no punches being thrown, which is very cool. Oh, I meant in English because they talk so damn fast. No, I'm fine. I mean, I understand English quite well, so it's just that I had to focus up on the heavy accents. Yeah. Also, when it comes to like character setup and story setup, much like the first episode's name, Ain't No Reason to Get Excited, the show doesn't seem to lose any time on like long-winded exposition of characteristics or setting up of the story. Everything is done very swiftly, very expertly, in terms of making the audience understand what's happening without an exposition dump, like narration or straight up saying what's going on. Like, you very quickly, through simple yet effective dialogue, understand where the story, when the story starts, or what the story is going to about, what's going to be the central theme, central topic, central motifs. All of these things you understand swiftly through realistic dialogue that just gets you into the flow of the story immediately, and the show can then focus on its humor or on the other main overarching topics of the whole show. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but yeah, very well done in my opinion. Great satire as well of different interest groups, from devout Christians to emos and Hicks. It's done very well. Like, it's not like a heavy satire. It's not like completely ridiculing these different social groups. It's more like trying to dive deeper into them and showing the different clashes between these two, between like a couple of these small town social groups, and how they interact, how they work. They're showing sort of their inner workings, and finding humor through that, essentially. Finding humor from how these social groups operate, what are the ambitions of its various members, or rather the ambitions of the entire groups, and sort of their positives, their negatives, and all of that, and finding humors in all this through like subtleties. Like, for example, the choice of vices. So you have these two hockey bros who spit into their cups because they chew tobacco. You have the Hicks that smoke simple cigarettes. Then you have the emos that do meth. And then you have the Christians who don't do any of that, but they seem sexually repressed and or very flamboyantly gay when it comes to Glenn. I'm not sure if I'd categorize that as vice, more so like their way of letting off steam, perhaps, or their way of depressurizing from their lives, something like that. Essentially, but you have these kind of subtleties, and they're not always part of the primary theme, which I think what makes a good story a great story. When you have when a filmmaker is capable of getting some subtle details into the episode, into the show, into the film, that communicates something about a character, or about the social group, or about whatever, some kind of ideology, whilst not being directly tied to the main storyline. So it's sort of like a deeper sort of a deeper layer to a story. And it's not like overdone over here. I'm not saying like this is some fucking, I don't know, Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul or anything like that. But it does have them, which shows that despite the fact that this guy, what's his name again, Jared Kiso, that he has a great command on proper writing, that could be seen straight from the start with all these details. The humor often comes from, or almost always comes from dialogue. It's not really slapstick comedy at all. So it has to, rely on good writing. And honestly, it is written well. It is written well, as I said. Even like from the humorous dialogue to the exposition, everything just kind of works. But more so than it works, it's also imaginative and creative. So, for example, in episode 1, there is like a running joke about Wayne being gay because he was dumped by his girlfriend recently, and he sort of, Katie, his younger sister, introduced him to Tinder, and it somewhat got confused with Grindr, and so, a joke about him being gay essentially comes up, which is a classic kind of tired joke that men do about people, or mostly men do about other men, because historically it was used to sort of like feminize other men. Oh, you're gay, like, well, if you don't throw the ball harder, it means you're gay. Shit like that, essentially. Which is, when you think about it, pretty offensive, and it shouldn't be done. Now, this is a small town, so things like that obviously are more likely to still happen. But the show actually takes a more creative approach to this. So these emos, I'm calling them emos because that's what they look like. Okay, they're not really called emos there, whatever. They're called like something beginning with S, not skanks, but like something like that. Anyway, skids. Yeah, thank you, mate. So they kind of circle Wayne, and they're making fun of him. Like, you're gay, haha. Like, you're gonna go and suck dicks and stuff. And then one of the skids say, "Hey guys, like, I kind of feel uncomfortable about this. I'm gay, right?" And like all of the skids immediately switch to their friends, and they say, "Oh, of course, we support you, and you're awesome and everything." And they like hug him, and he's like, "Okay, thank you." And then he makes a gay joke as well, which is very creative, very very funny in a way, and showing how they could have sort of intertwined this more of a like a PC world with this old joke, and showing that like, these guys aren't homophobic. They have gay people in their group as well, but since this is like a classic old joke, it still runs essentially, despite them being very accepting, which I think gives it more of a depth, more dynamic. It's less old, tired, and just plainly offensive, which I like. It shows creativity. It shows willingness to go further with your writing than just the generic shit. I'm shocked that there's not much ad-libbing, because it feels very much ad-libbed. So I don't think it feels very much ad-libbed, to be honest. I didn't even consider that any of this might be ad-libbed. The dialogues are, delivered very quickly, very swiftly, which might, get the feel of being ad-libbed. But it's so well put and so well written that I immediately knew. Like, I even had sort of like an opposite feeling when I heard the dialogue, because listen, right? So this is something that immediately hit me. Like, I don't think like I'm the cleverest man in the world at all, or anything like that, but I do make a living in writing in both English and Czech, and I write a lot. I write every single day. I have to always come up with new ideas and everything, and I would not be able to come up with half the shit that these guys come up with in their funny dialogues on the spot at all. It would be impossible for me. So yeah, I never felt it was ad-libbed. Sometimes I even felt that maybe it was like a bit too profound, not profound, but like too clever, maybe. But I didn't mind it because it was always in service of a great joke that felt true to the characters. So, I didn't really quite focus on it at all. Shores, you definitely had some moments that looked straight up ad-lib. Okay. Like skin marks on your underwear is how can a Canadian friend explain it to me? Oh, okay, interesting. There wasn't, but the reason that it seems like it is because of how many takes were used that have some of the background secondary characters that break character, and that being the best way to take. Oh, okay, okay. Your light is fixed. Oh yeah, yeah. My light. Thanks for noticing, Gautier. My light is fixed. That is true. It was already fixed on Monday because my father came over and fixed it and helped me fix it, or rather, he fixed it last weekend. But I didn't put it on because we were playing Outlast, of course. So yeah, but yeah, my light is fixed. My room is a light, so I'm very happy with that for sure. Stuart looks like the guy from the Twilight series who's the big shit vampire. Yeah, I think that's Edward Cullen, who's played by Robert Pattinson. Yeah, never actually seen Twilight, but it was such a cultural, massive thing that I just know all these things. Yeah. No, not Edward Cullen. No? No, then I don't know. Then I don't know what you mean, mate. Okay, so now to something that I didn't like. The fights. This show is very much about fighting. Episode 1 is actually about Wayne coming to term or trying to not fight because he used to be like this big tough guy, but his former girlfriend, talked him into dropping the fights, stopping all the fights. And he kept up with it even after she dumped him. So he was relentlessly mocked by everybody because they knew that he couldn't fuck them up. But then at the end he decided fuck it and fucked up his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend because he was behaving rudely to his friend. But so fights after this become a big part of the show overall. It's sort of like a staple of Wayne's character of being able to fuck up everybody. It's how much of the conflict is resolved. But it's not like childish in any way. It's put in there very well narratively, but choreographically it's horrendous. Okay, the fights, despite the fact that they are maybe not horrendous, maybe that's a strong word, but despite the fact that the fights are one of the primary themes of the whole show, they don't feel or look real at all. I don't know if I'm just spoiled from like action movies or something, but it looks like none of the punches thrown have actually landed. They are shot through angles where it's sort of obvious that they just did like this and the other guy did like this, and it just didn't quite just didn't quite feel real. It felt very staged, very light, very unreal essentially, like almost amateur, which quite surprised me actually. And I don't know why that was the case. I don't know if it's just season 1. But it felt almost like they saved on like battle or fight choreographers or something like that. Because it did quite surprise me how I just didn't believe the fights at all, Liking the vampires in the movie. I don't know what that is. Have you ever been in a fight? I have, yes. The fights are more realistic than most action movies. You're way too spoiled. So maybe in like how they are like, how it's like punch, dodge, punch, and like circling around, stuff like that. So like the strategy itself, but the way that it's shot is not realistic. Like I'm not saying that they should be like flipping around and breaking arms like John Wick. That's not what I mean. I mean that it doesn't feel real when a punch actually is supposed to hit someone. That's what I mean. Like the way that they fight, the way that they like circle around and the like battle strategy or whatever, All of that feels real, of course, feels like a regular fight. It's not like extremely realistic where I would be like, oh, holy shit, this is so realistic. And it's not like unrealistic at all. It feels like just grounded, right? The strategy itself. What doesn't feel real is when the punches are actually thrown, or when people fall to the ground and stuff like that. Like, I don't believe that they were punched. I don't believe that they were hurt. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It just doesn't feel that rawness of a fight that a grounded show such as this one should be able to achieve. That's what it looked like to me, real fights. Really? That's how fights really are in real life. It gets better. Yeah, it gets way better in future seasons. Okay. When they get picked up by a Crave. Okay. Well, that's good. But yeah, like I don't mean that they should be flipping around a lot. Yes, it is definitely the way they fight, like the way it's set up, that feels real. But not the actual fight itself, if you know what I mean. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean that the punches and then like the actual action of the hit or the contact, that doesn't feel like there was actual contact, that it feels staged. The staging of it, I guess. Yeah. The staging of it, yeah. I get what you mean, okay. Are you throwing out unrealistic again? No, I'm not. No, don't worry, Shadow. But I'm glad that it's constantly in your head, because I like when people, warn me of things that I do continuously. But no, that is not the thing. Like, it's not like unrealistic. Actually, it's the exact opposite. The fights itself, how the fights are set up, as in, like, punch and stuff, that feels realistic. That feels very realistic to me. But the contact itself is like poorly shot. It's not like unrealistic as in like people wouldn't behave that way or people wouldn't fight that way. It's just poorly shot as in I don't believe that they actually are fighting, I'm putting this down in my notes. Okay, Shadow, thank you. All right. Bonnie McMurray. What are you talking about? Are you still talking about the vampires? With Scott? I don't know. But yeah. Here... No, she's on Letterkenny. Oh, okay. The lady in the current photo. Oh, right. Okay. Anyway, so here are my thoughts from finishing first episode. As I said, first episode is always what I find principal in whether or not I'll watch the remainder of a show or whether or not I will enjoy it. Here's what I've written down. Overall, a positive experience. It's quick and effective in the communication of its central themes, funny and original. I would also add inventive, creative, and imaginative. So yeah, first episode went over quite well. I'm glad that you're excited. Gautier. So yeah, the other episodes probably won't take as long as as I've just outlined. Like I mean, I talked almost like half an hour about the first the first episode because they are very good in maintaining, which is also very important, by the way. Sorry, they are very good in maintaining their proper or their consistent storytelling techniques. Always set up very, very well. So immediately you would have the title at the beginning of second season. So now, second episode. Now we're talking about episode 2, which is called Daryl's Super Soft Birthday. We start again with, these are their, there are 5,000 people living in Letterkenny. These are their problems. It jives very well with the overall style of the show. It's very minimalistic with its introduction, much like the initial dialogue that you see pretty much on the beginning of every episode, where you have Wayne and Daryl usually alongside their friend Dan, talking about something which is generally unrelated, sometimes related, but sometimes unrelated to what will become the main topic of that particular episode. But the main topic always comes up eventually, either something interrupting the dialogue or them just getting an idea, essentially. So Daryl's super soft birthday is about Daryl sort of falling victim to this tradition of the other guys always throwing him the same kind of very soft birthday that he has gotten from his mother when he was very, very young. So complete with girly drinks and unicorns and all of that. They're essentially they're essentially throwing him this party as part of a tradition, making it very, very soft, essentially, sort of emasculated. Also, something that I didn't mention in the first episode because I didn't quite notice it in the first episode, but after this text, these are their problems, you have this scene that just appeared on screen right now. Wayne is always standing in a field somewhere, often holding a dog as if it were a baby, and telling us some kind of an anecdote, usually a one-sentence anecdote, which is humorous, with his thick Canadian accent delivered and very quickly, which sort of feels like a quote at the beginning of a chapter in a book, and I honestly love that style. Because it doesn't like immediately tell you the main theme, but it sort of like gets you in the feel for it. It sort of reveals the atmosphere. It sort of sets the boundaries essentially, actually, what do you call them? What do you call the fuck? I don't know the English word for this. What do you call the barriers on a hockey rink in English? Because in Czech we say mantinely, like mantinels. Anyway, what do you call that? But yeah, these are pretty much called opens, but the boards, I guess they're called the boards. I don't know. Sure, the boards, yeah. So it sort of like defines the boards of the episode. Sorry, I'll just. My boss told me that whenever I'm at home and connecting to a call to the office, and I pour my tea with my microphone on, it always sounds like I'm pissing. So I've now learned to always mute my mic every time I pour tea. So yeah, that was a bit of a faux pas on a couple of meetings before they told me that. Very interesting. Anyway, so yeah, as I said, the boards. What I mean by that is there is a monologue, or not really a monologue, it's sort of like 1-2 sentences that is very humorous. Here is like a compilation of them where he like holds a dog or something and talks to the camera straight up. And it's more than a cold open, because the way I see cold opens, like especially for example in The Office or in How I Met Your Mother and these classic sitcoms, it's usually like some kind of like either a prank, something which is usually sort of unrelated. It very rarely sets up the main topic of the actual episode. It's something to sort of like get you in sort of the atmosphere of the characters rather than anything else. But here, it's sort of, as I said, like a quote that's supposed to introduce a chapter. It sort of jives very well with what the show does at the beginning of every episode, which is swift and effective introduction of themes, motifs, and the general atmosphere or the direction or the creative direction of each and every episode. It's done very well with no exposition dump, and it's always very amusing. And this, I think, is the primary ingredient in achieving that amazing exposition or straight up exposition. All of the dogs except Gus, the second one from the left, are dogs that are up for adoption in the area. Really? That is so awesome. That's such a wholesome Canadian thing. I had no idea. Thank you, Gautier, for blessing us with that knowledge. But yeah, that is very, very cute. Very cute indeed. But yeah. Another thing that I noticed watching a second episode, Dan, who is one of the Hicks, he's the big guy. I don't know what it is, but in some scenes it feels like he's kind of a sloppy actor. He doesn't feel as fleshed out, or like I don't believe him as a character as much as I do Wayne and Daryl. It seems that some of his lines are delivered in somewhat of an amateur way. Like, I don't know if he's an amateur himself, actually, but he's the only character that I think, or the only actor that I don't think did a great job on this show. Some of the lines, it really did feel like it was delivered without feeling, or without him actually being in character. It felt very amateur for some reason. But again, could just be my opinion, but it's the only person or the only character in the entire show that felt to me that way. The second episode also blessed us, or blessed me, with the with a classic line that I keep hearing Cotier repeat to me time after time when we play whatever game we play. Give your balls a tug. And my reaction to hearing that was literally writing down, the big guy said it. I didn't know his name at the time. The big guy said it. Those boys need to give their balls a tug, written in all caps. I was very excited to finally hear it live in the show. And it's repeated several times. Like, I understand how it could get into somebody's lingo after hearing it like that. It's honestly a great line. I wasn't entirely sure when Cotier kept telling me to give me my balls a tug, but when I heard it in the show, which again shows how great this is written. Like, now I understand the true amusement or the true power of this line because of how well it's set up and how it's said properly in different situations. And hey, yeah, I completely forgot about that. We even have a dedicated command for Gautier, give your balls a tug. Hell yeah. I completely forgot. Thank you, man. Squirrelly Dan is played by comedian K. Trevor Wilson and is one of my favorite characters. I actually could see that. Like, in episode 4, the way he talks sometimes, I could see that he would be your favorite character. And yeah, I like him as well as a character for sure, but that doesn't change the fact that some of those scenes, he just felt like an amateur actor for some reason. I don't know if he, like, I guess he's a comedian, like, I don't know if he has enough experience in acting or something, but I don't know, it was odd. I'm too fat to run. That was very funny. That was in the last episode as well. I have that written down too. But yeah, this was his first show. Okay, well, I mean, it's understandable, but still something to bring up. Another subtle detail that I noticed in episode 2, which in this case doesn't really serve the story but serves the characters, which I think are even cooler subtle details, is the way Wayne walks. It's very determined, some almost like robotic, but very grounded in its sense. It feels real, yet it feels robotic. It's sort of like very proper. And his movements sort of talk about him as somebody who is really focused on what's right, and somebody who's like a very moral sort of authority figure, and also, of course, a farmer, So he walks. So he gets up in a very like swift and very determined, very thought out fashion. So like he would sit like this. Right? And he would talk to his friends or whatever, and then he would like stand up and he would walk, and then he would turn and walk again, right? So that's what he would do. And I think like this way that he walks, I hope I didn't I hope I didn't butcher it too much. It's sort of like it's very different from all the other characters how they walk. But it fits perfectly his character, because it shows again that he is like this farmer dude, he's just a hick, but also that he's this like determined figure. He has he has this kind of morality about him. His very like thought out authoritative way about him, which is that was funny. Thank you, Gautier. I really tried. He gets much better as the seasons go too. Much bigger as in like a bigger actor, or what do you mean? Yeah. Letterkenny is also like absolute genius when it comes to subtle details in the dialogues as well. It has several like sort of like running jokes or running pieces of dialogue that I learned sort of like get resolved towards the end. You know, so there's like sort of like mini stories that are happening. So, for example, there is Daryl, or not Daryl, Dan, essentially always telling Katie that he appreciates something about her. Like, for example, her bringing them drinks when they're out on the porch, something like minor like this. And Katie would always respond, "Is that what you appreciate about me, Dan?" And Wayne would immediately interject and say, "Tone it about 20%." Or something like that. Tone it down about 20%, or like, "Be careful, Dan, Squirrelly Dan," something like that. And Dan would just either like not respond or say something like, "Oh, hey, ground, there you are," and just look at the ground awkwardly, which is super funny as well. And that piece of dialogue is sort of repeated in every episode until the final episode in season 1, where Katie, again asks, "Is that what you appreciate about me?" And Dan finally, just decides to say it and looks at Wayne and tells him, "Your sister is very hot," and then immediately starts running, scared, through the field. And Wayne just looks at him, and eventually Dan stops running, saying, "I'm too fat to run," and that's essentially the end of that scene. But it's sort of like the show like even resolved something like minor like this, like a minor little running joke. There was they could have just left it there and just didn't go back to it, but the fact that they made it into like sort of like a mini story, like a developing mini story, a subtle detail, both like livened up all the dialogues throughout the show, but also gave it a satisfying end that sort of gave us some kind of resolution even to something minor like this. It just shows that they really care. They really care about what they write, which is a lot more to say than about the many of the films that we've reviewed here. And again, another thing that I appreciate about this show, as Squirrely Dan would say. It was like a D plot for the season. Yeah, it's like a Z plot even. Like there's so many subtle details that they just run, and are creative, yet kind of like regular, and they get resolved. Like it's amazing. It's amazing. The other like running D plot, as we can call it, was a guy fucking an ostrich, which was also introduced in episode 2, where they talk about like it's like a borderline bored dialogue about a man fucking an ostrich, which Dan would immediately interject with allegedly, and then they would discuss the logistics of how one person can fuck an ostrich, and there's more and more details sort of added to it as the episodes go. Like a couple of episodes further, they say it was a sick ostrich. That they say even a sick ostrich, you would need like 2 or 3 people for the job, and that would always be the end of the discussion. And toward the end, there's this final battle in the final episode between different social groups sort of banding together, where the guy that fucked an ostrich actually makes an appearance. He doesn't have any lines or anything like that. It's more of an extra, but that sort of is some form of a resolution to that whole debate as well. Allegedly, yeah, the ginger and boots, too funny. Yeah, so yeah, like these tiny little things that aren't even concerned with the main topic. Like, remember, the main topic of the episode is Daryl's super soft birthday, and these things are running in the background, don't take up too much time at all, like always about like 1 maximum 2 minutes an episode, whilst focused on the primary topic at hand, which is always almost always is very, very entertaining, very amusing, provides lots of potential for humor, but generally I think, like, the way I see it, it sort of shows a backdrop, or sort of establishes a backdrop to the funny dialogue. Um, Funny dialogue to yeah, the funny dialogue, which is in my opinion the primary thing. The only misstep that I found when it comes to like a primary topic of an episode was, in my opinion, episode 3, which is called Fart Book. The idea or the main topic behind this episode is the Hicks sitting around and farting, and them deciding to make a social media website where people can share their farts called Fart Book. Now, I probably have already told you this, but I find farts very funny. It's like an embarrassing thing of mine, that whenever somebody farts, I laugh in real life, which is unfortunate for sure, because it makes the situation even more awkward every time. But I just can't help myself, which is odd that this is the episode that I liked the least, despite being entirely about farts. And I learned something about myself thanks to this, because when it's like forced, it's not funny, you know. It's not funny. I just thought of a joke. Yeah, it's pretty much like farts, you know. When they're forced, it's not as funny, because then you shit the bed. Anyway, that was my joke. Episode 3 is generally considered the worst episode of the series. See? Well, I agree with that. Thank you, Gautier, for laughing. I appreciate that. The episode sort of like continues with its primary motif of different social groups sort of interacting: the Hicks, the Hokey Bros, the emos, the church people, and all of them sort of find their way to Fart Book as well. And then then the plot line sort of moves in sort of like the social network kind of way, essentially showing how the emos sort of stole the idea and remade it to their image and tried to angle out the Hicks, similarly to Mark Zuckerberg angling out the other people involving Facebook in real life. But it's done, I don't know, it's nothing very imaginative there, except for the fact that it's about farts. But having you know, farts being constantly played and checking out different people's farts, whether it's Glenn or Gail or Katie or anything like that, it just I don't know, it felt like that was the biggest humor of the show, and it just wasn't very strong, in my opinion. But yeah, the only thing that I liked about it was sort of the show's, I think, first foray into having some kind of like a deeper meaning behind it. So like I didn't really care for the Mark Zuckerberg thing, but Wayne essentially didn't really get involved into Fart Book, despite being there when the idea was born and being on board with it. He didn't, you know, post anything there or didn't really discuss anything, because, as he said at the end of the episode, he believed that you know, farts should be something private. That it shouldn't be, you know, shared to people around, which sort of like devolved into like a commentary about today's internet and oversharing, which worked because it was based on like a funny or somewhat funny, amusing pedestrian level humor. So yeah, I enjoyed that. But otherwise, I fucking love Gail. Interesting. I didn't really care much for Gail. I don't know. I didn't find her funny. But yeah, Gail is, by the way, for those of you that don't know, Gail is the bartender of this in this show, and she's like constantly horny for Wayne, especially, which I guess in a way is kind of funny, but I think it was overused a little bit, so I wasn't laughing that much. So yeah, episode 3 was sort of like a throwaway episode for me. Oops. Episode 4 is called Wingman Wayne. It's once again very swiftly put. All the topics are very swiftly put across to us. It's all it's very well set up. No exposition dump through the dialogue. This essentially every episode is the same. So I'll just stop talking about it. Also, like, I didn't quite talk about this as well, but every episode has, or almost every episode has, like, a secondary topic to it as well, which is set up right after the primary one in a very similar, Jesus Christ, in a very similar fashion. And this one, and they have some kind of like vague similarity or vague interconnectedness between them. So here, there's like a week where all the university college women come back home. So, it's considered amongst the men as like, hitting on women week. And Wayne is sort of forced playing wingman for, or somewhat of a wingman for his friends Daryl and Dan. Whilst the hockey bros, I believe it's this one, right? Yeah, while the hockey bros realizing that Katie is no longer coming to their hockey games because they sort of hang out with her quite a lot, they care about this, and Katie essentially tells them, well, I don't really want to, you hang out there because you rarely play and you always lose. And that's sort of like their motivation to get better. So they start working on each other. They say, stuff like, we're here and we need to get here, and they get really motivated through that entire thing. It's sort of like initiated again by essentially a woman, by wanting to be with a woman, some sort of like a loneliness, male loneliness, initiating both like an evening of drinking and trying to hit on women for the Hicks, as well as the hockey bros, starting to work on each other despite their coach telling them that they're posers. So similar sort of, like kind of like, I guess, sexual or romantic inclination, sort of put both of these topics in both of these themes of the episode in motion, which is very good. Very, very well set up, very well interconnected. So yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing there. I also started to realize watching this episode that the tonality of like pretty much all of the dialogue, whether it be with Hicks or with the hockey bros, feels like exactly the same. And again, this might be like a cultural thing, but all of these dialogues are very fast paced, obviously, and it sort of has like the same music to them. It sort of goes up and down in the same tone that I would love to like imitate to tell you what I mean, but I can't. And I don't know if it's like a Canadian thing. So maybe a question for Courtier. But it feels like that they're shifting their tone up and down. And I hear Courtier talk in that tone from time to time, but not always. Especially when he goes really Canadian, when he's frustrated or telling me to give my balls a tuck or something like that. When he goes like a little bit when he goes like super Canadian, he sort of gets this tone as well. So, but that's something that is pretty much like constant in this in this show, and I wonder whether it's because like it's if you go more rural, then you speak more Canadian-y, because that's sort of what happens in not everywhere, but very often that's what happens in England, right? When you go more rural, you get heavier English accents than you would get in like central parts of town. So you could, it's a bit more complicated in England because you get your South London accent, which is very heavy as well. You have your Cockney and everything like that, which is very much South London. But I mean, very much so. If you go rural, you get very funny, very interesting accents. And here it sort of feels almost like the American South. You know, they have their special little accents there as well. But here it's very like tonality based. Like I really enjoyed it. It's just something that I noticed there. Yeah. Also, another thing, Wayne is extremely wise. That's what I noticed in episode 4, because he has like not like extremely wise as in like, you know, Yoda or something, but like sort of like streetwise or like emotionally intelligence levels very high. Because despite him not really hitting on any women, he always notices when other women sort of try to hit on Daryl or give signals to Daryl or Dan. He sort of always, you know, identifies that signal and tells them that, hey, listen, this woman, you know, is after you. You should go talk to her. And you know, like him always explaining, like, do you see what she's doing with her hair? That's what women do when they notice a guy that they like, when they're trying to get their attention. Or you know, these things. You know, he would always explain himself completely. And the response of his friends, of Daryl and Dan, was, okay, well, I guess I can go there, but first let's have a couple of drinks. This happens twice, and then Wayne says, this is swiftly, what does he say? I have it written down somewhere here. Well, this is swiftly becoming a counterproductive practice, but okay. Which was very funny. Which was a very funny line in you know, in connection to that. But also again made me realize, like, holy shit, did he just whip out this sentence that I could barely read, let alone come up with on the spot? Maybe I would come up with it at the spot, but he's always like very witty, which I love. And it's surprising that I didn't find it distracting, because of, you know, how Shadow knows I am very preoccupied with my realism and all that. And honestly, the way he speaks is exceptionally intelligent. But it's kind of like, because it's a dialogue-based humor that's sort of key for this show, it kind of just works, you know? It kind of just works, and honestly, I can't really... Yeah, if it works for me, then it just works, I guess, in my opinion. But yeah, the ending to this one felt kind of abrupt, because they were sort of like there in the bar, and they didn't really talk to any women, and then the hockey bros continued to practice, but there was no like big ending or anything like that. It just felt it just ended, you know. It sort of cut to black, and that was it. So that felt kind of abrupt. Surprisingly so, because the other ones usually are very well tied off. But yeah, this one was, I don't know, had a weird ending. But yeah, then we move on to episode 5, called Rave. And this episode was another one that surprised me. The reason why it surprised me is because it introduced a new element to the storytelling of the show itself. Now, straight up from the rip, it was shown how, again, you had this like initiator that started off the two main themes of the episode, and in this case, it was Katie, particular, the young sister of Wayne. Sort of, you know, she's, you know, very appealing, she's very sexy, and that actually became the primary incentive for all the boys in Letterkenny, essentially. The hockey bros, you know, trying harder in hockey. So she comes to their show. That's sort of like continuing there. And then also Stuart, who's the leader of the emos, and Meth Head deciding to drop a meth because she told him, hey, listen, you know, you were really cool, but now that you're doing meth, you know, you're not cool. And she didn't tell him like that. It was well written, trust me. But it's essentially something that he realized through his conversation with Katie, that he became unappealing because of this, and he he drops essentially his meth habits, and instead decides to host a rave for people to come, and pays a lot of money for it. Ferda, what are you saying? I don't know what you're saying, dude. I'll explain later. Okay. So yeah, when I talked about the element that surprised me, it was the element of like character arc, which I didn't expect in a sitcom like this, which is focused on humor. It had like Stewart had a very powerful like character story in this one, because he first, as I said, he went to organize this rave and stop his meth head business, and his or his meth, not yeah business. He was out of the business, but he also stopped doing meth, which of course angered his fellow skids. But they decided to sort of sabotage his little show, his rave, by telling everybody that the walls there where the rave was going to take place are of asbestos, and then Wayne also, because he wanted to host something in the same building, decided to sabotage it as well and started collecting possums, which was by the way the secondary topic of the secondary, or rather the tertiary theme of the of the episode, because it was really jam-packed episode, because in this one they were collecting possums with Daryl, and Daryl actually got rabies because he was bit, and he had to be transported to the hospital. But that's beside the point. I know that was a well set up story as well, but that's not what we're talking about. So everybody wanted to sabotage Stewart, but Stewart had like this moment of trying to change his life, and the show sort of introduced close-ups for the very first time, like effective, powerful, emotional close-ups, which really surprised me, because there was mostly on Stewart. These close-ups were mostly on Stewart, where we could see his face first, sort of like bloodshed, on meth or in withdrawal, but then sort of him dressing up and putting on makeup and everything, and sort of like being reborn through that makeup, and having some kind of a transformation, or an attempted transformation, and him organizing this rave, and then the rave being a complete bust. He was like dancing, he had all this like pyrotechnics and everything and cool music, and it was a completely empty hall with only like security guards and Katie there, and Katie would then leave because it was dead. There was nobody there, which he saw this. There was another close-up. It obviously broke his heart, and then he came back to his friends, or to his former friends, the Skids. He tasted the meth that they made, and he said, we need to do better. And they're like, wait, so are you back in the business? And he's like, yeah, I'm back in the business. And then the episode sort of closes with him raving with his friends, with the other Skids, again on meth, just dancing in front of a building on the street or something, in the back alley, and sort of raving with them to music, and him sort of smiling and being happy, which surprised me how, even though it was jam-packed with humor, with the regular humor, with Daryl getting rabies and being barely able to walk, constantly vomiting, and Wayne showing no concern for him, because of, I don't know, I guess his country ways. In the middle of that, you had this primary theme of this guy essentially trying to escape his life, but being slapped down by failure, and then getting back to drugs, for us to sort of like realize that the reason why he's in this lifestyle is because he doesn't believe that he can fit anywhere else. It's sort of very tragic, very powerful, very emotional, but the show doesn't milk it at all. Like it's just there, and it's well portrayed exactly how I told you. and it shows like sort of promise. It's strange how like this is vastly more emotionally powerful than any other episode, but it does it well because it's, again, it's not overly done. It's not super milked or anything, but it sort of shows promise. Like an episode like this is the episode that when I saw it, it's like if I'm gonna watch the following seasons, I probably won't do a review on the following seasons because I feel like I've already discussed the show. I don't want to do it again. If I'm gonna watch the following seasons, which I probably will, which I might, this is the episode that made me watch them, because it shows promise beyond well-written dialogue and beyond funny scenes and beyond funny characters. It shows that it has potential in creating, emotional or powerful messages, which, in my opinion, is the central idea or central or the major importance or the major purpose of art. And this is the episode that showed me that it's capable, that this show is capable of doing that, which, yeah, the biggest motivator for me to watch following seasons, for sure. It is such a real moment in the show. Yeah, exactly. And it sort of comes out of nowhere, because it's mostly focused on this fun dialogue and everything like that. But here is this episode that truly has this kind of powerful scene. Not a powerful scene, a powerful story, which I really enjoyed, really connected with as well. It's going to be a longer review than usual, but don't worry, we're about to head to our final episode. Scott, do you have any other ideas or any other points to what I said? Points of discussion, disagreement, or anything like that? Or what about you, Shadow? Do you think you would watch something like this? The final episode of season 1, episode 6, is called A Fuss in the Back Bush. Once again, swift and effective intro to the main story. They are hunting coyotes, Wayne and Daryl, whilst and then they notice a bunch of wheat plants in their sort of backyard. Immediately followed by the story B setup, all through amusing dialogue and some plot line appearing naturally yet out of nowhere. A classic staple of this show. Very well done as well. The story B is set up right after that with hockey players in their changing room noticing, or the hockey bros, I don't know, Jonesy and the other guy, forgot their names, because they're not named very often, discovering that one of the rookies, one of the newbies in their hockey team is on meth in that changing room. So we immediately get the topic of drugs sort of invading the society as a whole, of Letterkenny being more and more of a meth town, which is a real issue in everywhere in the world essentially. But here it's portrayed through how it affects the community. We've already kind of grown accustomed to these different social groups, and meth was always like the area of these skids. Like they do meth and they do that, and then you would have these hockey bros who they talk like fuckboys, play hockey, and they're posers, and they chew tobacco and spit into a cup. And then you have the hicks who sit around, do nothing seemingly, drink whiskey and smoke some cigarettes, and have funny talks about who fucked an ostrich. And here we can see like how like one of these primary characterization of a group is sort of invading another group through drugs as well. So you have like a double invasion essentially that you're talking about here, because it's both like an influence of another group, and also drugs. So you could have some kind of like social commentary as well as just like a story commentary or character commentary here. So immediately set up very quickly, yet very powerful and very very rich themes set up within the first 3 minutes of an episode. Amazing stuff, amazing writing for sure. And no exposition dump. Like this is the reason why I always rant about narration and text exposition, or straight up, dialogue expositioning the shit out of a story at the beginning when it comes to movies or TV shows in general, because it's sort of like it devalues it devalues the work of writers like these ones, because these guys, it's tough to do a proper exposition into something heavy or something complicated or complex through any other means than literally saying it. So the way I see it, when I hear narration in a show or in a film at the beginning, that gives us an exposition dump, like in Dread, for example, it always reminds me of shows like this or moments like this, where you get the exposition through natural dialogue, or through natural situations arising through real people, and it's honest writing, it's honest work. And when you have narration, it's lazy and it's poor workmanship, essentially. That's how I see it. That's why I always get so passionate about this, because for me, and I like it's sort of like if I was a carpenter and I I really appreciated great tables, how like great tables are made, and then I see a fucking shit table that you put a feather on and it fucking drops. That's sort of how I see it. So I try to always give positive feedback when somebody does it right, and always negative feedback when somebody fucks it up. So yeah, this is a bit of a tangent there, but I just want to explain myself there. So yeah. Another a subtle detail that we talked about is resolved in this episode, much like the ostrich fucking and the what do you appreciate about me, Dan. Another sort of little thing, not really like resolved. It's not like a recurring dialogue. But if you remember how I said how the hockey bros try to work on themselves or better themselves in order to impress Katie, but they genuinely try to make a change in their life, to not just, hang out and really have no ambition, but to like play hockey a little bit, but didn't really even try. They would say these things like, "We are here and we need to be here," and it was something that was portrayed as them finally, bettering themselves. But here in this episode, they get mad at Stewart, because and this is the primary theme of the whole episode. Stewart buys some cigarettes off of people from a different town, and they tell him, "Listen, this is for your personal use. You can't resell it." And he resells it, and they get mad. They want their money back. And since they don't get their money back, they start trashing the town. But also they're mad at Stewart for not only that, but the fact that they got their rookie hockey player into meth, right? And here is where it comes, right? So this thing, like, we're here, we need to be here, was used for them to like better themselves. But here they sort of repeat it, where they want to trash Stewart's place as a retaliation, and they're like, hyping themselves up like proper fucking jocks, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna fuck it up, like, we're here, but we need to be here, in a very shallow sort of childish, primitive way. And to use that same dialogue or that same thing for something this shallow, whilst before it was sort of their rallying cry of getting better, really shows that the coach was right. They are posers. They just took this thing that was meant to mean something, and they used it in like a very primitive setting, sort of like devaluing the power of it, much like posers or people that just want to, like, you know, that don't really try and just, like, you know, are posers essentially, devalue everything with the way that they, you know, lead their lives, or with the way they talk, which I think is again a great show of imaginative writing, of creative writing. How this is like a great characterization without, you know, anybody telling them what they feel about them, or without them characterizing each other. It's like a subtle detail that when you pick up on it, you immediately sort of connect it to these characters, you immediately learn something about them, you know? So yeah, very good. They were the natives that live on the reserve. Yeah, sorry. That is right. That is right. They were yeah, they were sold e-cigarettes by the natives, not people from a different town. Well, technically, you know, they're different towns, but didn't want to go into too much detail. I tried to because I am aware that lots of my, like, sentences are extremely loaded. I try to skip all of some bits. I shouldn't have skipped this, obviously. Jesus Christ! I'm actually gonna finish this tea. I had a liter and a half in my thing, and it's nearly done. Fucking hell. Ah. So yeah, great characterizations there. The episode sort of runs off with so the episode sort of like culminates in the natives trying to destroy the property all around Letterkenny, because their strategy is essentially to make Stuart not paying his debt to them a problem of the entire town, in probably the hopes of the entire town sort of turning on Stuart. But when the natives go with a big posse to to confront Stuart, they are met with the entire town, and the entire town, all the social groups, sort of band together to beat up the natives. Despite Wayne sort of offering money to the leader of these natives. So yeah, they are essentially the social groups essentially come together in a very interesting, like, not really very interesting. It was an okay tying off of the first season, of all of them coming together when they're facing an opponent from, like, out of their circle. It sort of made sense. And yeah, I was fine with it. I was fine with it. It was nice. I also like how they always drink whiskey. That's a little thing, but I do like whiskey myself. What I didn't quite appreciate was the exact end of the final episode. Was, you know, all of the groups, the whole town essentially coming together around a table and drinking whiskey together, and you know, having some dialogue and stuff, but them essentially being together. And then a tough guy comes into the bar and asks who's the toughest guy there. Wayne stands up, like, that would be me, and him getting knocked out like immediately, sort of being the last shot of the episode, which to me, like, it felt, you know, natural that something like this would be or like an obvious cliffhanger for the second season, like, oh, there's a new tough guy in town. Since the entire season, one of the longest running themes was Wayne being a tough guy who could beat up anybody, and did beat up a lot of people. So, you know, that him getting a new competition would be a great setup. But it felt kind of, I don't know, I think they could have done better, in my opinion. A show that did something like episode 5, by the way, this is a shot from episode 5, this close up. I felt like that was sort of like a meh. Wasn't sure about that. Tyson. I don't know, he wasn't introduced in season 1. Being the toughest guy in Letterkenny. Yeah. But yeah, this review has been very, very long already, so I'm just gonna go to the conclusion. I'll just repeat in as summarizing of sentences of a couple sentences as I can what I felt about the show overall. Now, clearly, the jig is up. I'm no longer pretending. Did I like it? Did I not like it? Obviously, I liked it. Okay, it was a great show. I really enjoyed it. And it surprised me several times with its writing, which is what I focus on the most, which is what's most important to me as a writer. It's super funny. It made me laugh even thinking about the lines again. And I really appreciate that you recommended it, Cotier, and I'm very happy that I didn't have to let you down with me not liking it. But yeah, overall, the reason why I liked it, there was an absolute mastery of effective narrative shortcut, which I, as a person who writes short stories and makes short films, really appreciate as well. This was shown in the fast yet effective and not lazy exposition of every single episode when it comes to story A, B, and sometimes in story C. Always pushing the story forward with only a couple missteps when the writing got a little lazy. So I didn't quite talk about it. That there was like, I mean, I literally have 5 pages of notes for this, so I didn't quite, like, there was some writing, like, for example, the fart book writing, I sort of talked about it, yeah, fart book writing, like, too much of a focus on the social network, satire, it felt a bit cheap, but other than that, like, everything felt really, really good. The humor, obviously fantastic, I laughed all the time, and it was well interconnected through the satirizing of the different social groups, the hicks, the fuckboy hockey players, and the tech savvy skids, essentially, and then the clash / communication between them coming together at the end of the season. It all sort of worked together very well, very, very well. It's also a very chill show, a show that sees no reason to get excited, much like the first episode tells us. It perfectly sums up the general feel of the show, honestly, the name of the first episode. And the show does very well to establish this as well. Yeah, the only thing that I found, like, genuinely some, like, a negative thing that like the worst thing that I found about it is that despite fighting being one of the major themes of the show, it seems like poorly choreographed. I think that's the word. It's not like unrealistic fighting, or something, or uninteresting or anything like that. But like the way it's choreographed, it's and shot, it's just not really good. It looks kind of amateur. It's always kind of repetitive. Yeah, that's actually fine. Yeah, the main issue that I have is that none of the punches look like they hit. It feels like they saved on like professional fight choreographers or something. But yeah, that is honestly like the a pretty small thing when you realize how much this show has to offer. I would genuinely recommend it to everybody here to check it out. It's only 20 minutes an episode, so definitely worth watching. I think that almost everybody would find it amusing, and I think it has a lot more to offer. And I think that I'll watch many more seasons, or at least season 2. I'm not gonna promise many more seasons, but at least season 2. But yeah, I won't review them because I think that that's sort of not the thing that we do here. I think that's yeah. I don't want to make this like a series of reviews, but I will watch it in my spare time because I just enjoyed it and I think it has good potential. So yeah, thank you again, Cotier, for recommending it to me. And now I leave the floor to you, chat. If you have any kind of questions, any other ideas, anything you agree with me on or disagree with me on, yeah, let me know.